Today's briefing will include highlights and updates on safety and security from APD, actions taken on our One Atlanta, One APD immediate action plan, info on our new policing alternatives and diversion and community referral services initiative, and a major announcement about our new fire chief. And before I get into my remarks, I just want to thank my husband, Derek, who reminds me that nobody ever thanks him for anything, for vacating his office this morning so that I could have a better internet connection. So hopefully all will be clear during this briefing. I want to recognize the significance of the week that we've had thus far. We began this week honoring the life and legacy of Atlanta's native son, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., with the 38th celebration of the national holiday in his honor. The theme this year was appropriately entitled The Urgency of Creating the Beloved Community. We all stood still this summer as thousands of people took to the streets to demand basic human and civil rights around racial equity and equality. And then yesterday, we collectively held our breath as the nation moved closer to the ideal and dream of creating the beloved community with the swearing in of our 46th president and the first ever woman of color as the vice president of the United States. I was honored to attend the inauguration with my husband, and it was simply magical. Hope is on the horizon, not just for our nation, but also here in Atlanta. As we prepared for the activities surrounding our national transfer of power, the nation was on guard for civil unrest. Atlanta and the state of Georgia were ready. I want to introduce Atlanta Police Chief Rodney Bryant, our interim police chief, to tell us how APD ramped up to keep up with public safety. And also, before I do that, I want to make sure I have this correct in sending congratulations to Interim Chief Bryant. So I'm going to make sure that I read it correctly. He was selected as one of 50 law enforcement leaders around the country to attend the FBI's National Executive Institute. So congratulations to you. And Chief Bryant, if you can share more with us about this week in public safety in our city.
Thank you, Mayor Bottoms. I want to begin by thanking every Atlanta police officer for their dedication on Sunday and Wednesday leading up to the inauguration. We work diligently with our federal partners and our state and local partners who put more than 300 resources on the street to secure the government center in the event of civil unrest if it had ensued. Thankfully, it did not, but our city was well protected. And while we were securing the city against unrest, we also had to continue our daily crime fighting efforts. Through our continued collaboration and federal partners through Operation Phoenix, thus far, we have apprehended over 14 violent offenders. In addition, our APD units, including our violent crime reduction team and gun assault team, have continued to make progress, removing over 678 guns off the streets and apprehending some 385 offenders. So, Madam Mayor, as we vowed before, we will continue to be vigilant in making our city safe. And I'd be remiss, Madam Mayor, if I didn't talk about my closest partner, Chief Randall Slaughter, who's also throughout this entire time continued to be beside us as we protected this city, forever. His leadership with the Department of Atlanta Fire Rescue, and I wish him the best in his next endeavors. Back to you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Chief. And also, in addition to Chief Slaughter, it was heartwarming to watch national coverage of Atlanta's preparedness. And one of the reporters took note that there were even dump trucks at the intersections. And we know that's because of our coordination across public safety, but also with public works and our other departments. So Thank you to all of our employees who kept our city safe over the past week. We are appreciative and thank you for all that you're doing. It's recognized not just here locally, but nationally as well. Recently, we launched our One Atlanta, One APD immediate action plan to address the spike in violent crime in Atlanta. The plan includes both immediate and long-term actions, and today I will give you an update on where some of those actions stand. As it relates to our nuisance properties, we committed in our plan to address nuisance properties, which are a threat to public health, welfare, and safety, including those that may contribute to the commission of a violent crime. I know some people think of nuisance property as just those properties that are in disrepair, but we know that it's so much more to that. They are those properties that often disrupt our communities. We're happy to report that our administration introduced legislation on January 19th to strengthen our public safety response to these properties. The legislation calls for ensuring that businesses licensed in the city as restaurants actually operate as such. At the time of the annual liquor license renewal, restaurants will be required to submit a statement from a certified public accountant that proves that at least 50% of its sales come from food and beverages. Additionally, this legislation adds a maximum penalty for the first violation, which is the revocation of the business's liquor license. Also, the plan calls for additional resources and targeted enforcement on gangs and gun violence. As Chief Bryant stated, we continue to make progress in our partnership with the FBI under Operation Phoenix, our violent crime reduction team, and the gun assault team. During a recent meeting with the new Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis and Fulton County Sheriff Pat Labatt, whom I know both very well, we discussed opportunities to further partner in joint task force focused on investigating and prosecuting gun crimes, gangs, and other serious violent offenders. I'm looking forward to continuing the working relationship, not just with our district attorney and our new sheriff, but with all of our partners on the focus on decreasing violent crimes. And for whatever reason, there is an untrue rumor circulating that we are not involved in gang task force. People need to understand that there are multiple task force throughout the city and the state. So we are involved in coordinating with those efforts, involved in partnerships with various partners. I don't know if it is just intentional spreading of misinformation, but I want to make sure that people understand there are multiple fronts attacking gangs and violence in our communities, and we are involved and will continue to increase that involvement. I will speak now on cameras, street safety, and school safety. The expansion and maintenance of our Operation Shield camera network in partnership with the Atlanta Police Foundation continues to be a priority. An executive steering committee is reviewing our approach and longer-term plans related to the expansion and maintenance of the camera network. We've already begun the expansion in zones throughout the city and will continue to maintain that network. Additionally, in addition to Operation Shield camera network, the Operation Shield camera network expansion, this week the City Council approved an agreement with the Atlanta Public Schools to put in place speed cameras in school zones. This is something that was discussed quite a bit during my run for mayor, so I'm very happy that we are able to partner with APS to make this a reality. Technology and our cameras, as we know, are an important tool for APD to expand their presence and reach to keep our city safe. And again, we are happy to partner with APS on this initiative. Our plan also calls for actions to improve recruitment and retention of police officers and 911 operators. As you can imagine, being a 911 operator is a very stressful and often thankless job. So thank you to our 911 operators. On Tuesday, our public safety legislation was adopted to implement a pay and class increase for our 911 call center employees. On average, this change will represent 13%, a 13% increase in pay for our 911 call center positions. This increase is designed to improve recruiting and retention within the 911 call center, which we know is a very important part of the city's ability to respond and track emergency calls for service. PAD 311. While it's not officially part of our One Atlanta, One APD action plan, the City of Atlanta and the Policing Alternatives and Diversion Initiative are partnering to launch 311 Community Referral Services. The purpose of 311 Community Referral Services is to provide residents the option of reporting non-emergency issues of concern related to substance abuse, mental health, and or poverty, with ATL 311 serving as the non-emergency line for these calls. Through this new partnership, residents will be able to call 311 regarding issues of community concern to help facilitate outreach and services to people through the deployment of the PAD harm reduction teams. I'll give you an example. We often get calls about homeless encampments. That would be an opportunity for our residents to call 311 so that we can make sure that the appropriate social services team is also deployed. Other examples include disturbances, excessive noise outside of business or blocking traffic, welfare, such as someone asking for food or help, as I mentioned with our homeless population, mental health, that would be someone who appears disoriented, erratic, or perhaps even talking to themselves, and basic needs, such as someone in need of shelter and sleeping outside. The goal of the 311 Community Referral Services is to improve public safety and wellness by addressing quality of life concerns in a way that provides people with immediate resources and assistance in navigating social services and other systems. The initial launch will take place in APD zones 5 and 6, and the plan will be to extend this program citywide by the end of 2021. As always, our community is welcome to call 911 in the case of an emergency, but for non-emergency situations, we ask that people continue to use 311. It's now my pleasure to announce that our administration has hired a new fire chief, but before we do that, I want to take a moment to publicly thank our current chief, Randall Slaughter. It is very difficult to believe that he is eligible for retirement. He has served the city of Atlanta for 30 years of distinguished service to our city, working his way up through the ranks. Proud APS graduate. I am going to personally miss Chief Slaughter. I'm very sorry to see that he is leaving the fire department, but I know that 30 years is a long time to be anywhere. And again, Chief Slaughter, I've shared with you just my personal appreciation in private and just publicly. I just, again, want to thank you for your leadership. It has been a pleasure to work alongside you. I am now proud to announce the appointment of Rod Smith, another APS graduate, as the next fire chief for the city of Atlanta. Rod Smith is currently a deputy chief within Atlanta Fire and Rescue. He's a native of Atlanta, not the best high school. He's a graduate of Mays High School, but maybe somewhere second or third best, I don't know. And has had a distinguished career with the Atlanta Fire Rescue Department, having led the technical services field operations in our airport division. Again, graduate of great HBCU, again, not the best HBCU, it's not FAMU, but Morehouse, so that's a pretty good school too. So we are looking forward to his service and his leadership, and I know that he is well thought of within the department, and we appreciate his willingness to lead. So as we prepare to close this first press briefing of the year. I want you to know that we will continue to have these briefings as often as necessary. And thank you for your continued interest in our administration, and of course, all that we continue to do on behalf of the people of Atlanta. And so with that, I will open up for questions.
All right, if you have a question, please raise your hand and turn on your camera. And once you are promoted, please state your name and affiliation. So first up, we will have Sean Keenan. Sean, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Hey, Mayor Bottoms, thanks for having this. I'm Sean Keenan. I work for about 1,000 publications, but I guess this is for supporter report. So I want to discuss a little bit about the recent pro-Trump demonstrations. I attended a bunch of them. APD and many law enforcement agencies kept things well under control. But I mean, there were definitely dicey situations where Trump supporters had snipers on rooftops, where supposed Antifa demonstrators were brandishing guns. I mean, things got very hectic. And then especially the day during which demonstrators at the nation's capital raided the Capitol. There were no arrests in downtown Atlanta that afternoon, but then later in the evening, some racial justice activists were arrested. About 24 of them were arrested downtown. And I'm just curious if you can discuss that disparity in treatment of the demonstrators, many of whom believe that they were arrested essentially for jaywalking. So could you just talk about the relationship between law enforcement and the citizenry, and what more we can do to, I guess, bridge the divide right now?
Yes, certainly. And I'll also let Chief Ryan join in, Sean, you may want to mute yourself. I'm not sure if that's your background noise. Thank you. Every situation is assessed independently and accordingly. So I can't speak to what the assessment was earlier in the afternoon. But what I can say is that as we saw over the summer, there was a great deal of varying situations, and the need to address each situation and each person independently. Also, a lot of patience was shown from our law enforcement partners in a number of situations. So Chief Ryan, I'm going to let you, if you can, speak more specifically to the incidents that Sean has referred to.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and you're absolutely correct. We actually evaluate each incident separately. So the city of Atlanta, we monitor a number of protests and demonstrations continuously, almost every day. On this particular day, what we actually encountered was people initially started out being peaceful protesters, and as they were asked to clear the street, someone from inside of that crowd began to throw items at the police department, at the police officer. And so to ensure that we never rise to the situations that we have before, our officers immediately recognized that it was time to, this act was no longer, this protest or demonstration was no longer becoming peaceful. And so we had to take an action. So we support protests continuously. We think that there's an individual constitutional right to do so, but we are there to protect their constitutional right, but also the peace and the safety of the citizens of the city of Atlanta.
All right, thank you.
All right, next up we have Maria Boynton. Maria, go ahead.
Is the delay on our end? I know we had a delay with Sean.
Maria, go ahead.
Maria, you're muted, I think. Can you hear us, Maria? Okay, I can't hear Maria. Are you muted, Maria?
We'll try.
Maria, we'll come back to you. Let's go to the next question while we figure what's going on with Maria's audio.
All right, JD, go ahead.
JD, can you hear us?
I can. I'm here now.
Okay.
Hi, Mayor Bottoms. Yeah, JD Capelouto with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I was wondering first if you wanted, I guess, to talk a little bit about your new role with the DNC as a vice chair, and I guess what would you say to reassure residents that you can, I guess, do both jobs as well, especially with such a turbulent time for public safety in the city and with COVID as well? What would you say to residents?
So thank you for asking that. With my new role, I am vice chair over civic engagement and voter protection. I'm very excited about that role. We know there have been a lot of discussions, not just in Georgia, but across the nation, and making sure that the integrity of the right to vote is preserved. What I would say in terms of my ability to do both, you should not want a mayor who can't walk and chew gum at the same time. There are CEOs across this city, there are professionals across this city who have a number of interests. They volunteer in organizations. This is no different. This is a volunteer position. This is not a full-time position. And I think that it really speaks to the value seen of Atlanta on the national stage that I have been invited to serve in this role. So just as I have served in leadership positions with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, over the Housing Committee, also the Census Committee with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, this is no different than other leadership positions that I've had the opportunity to serve in. And it's something that obviously I'm personally happy about, but I think Atlanta should be proud of the opportunity to have Atlanta on the national stage in this way.
Certainly, certainly. And this might be more of a question for Chief Bryant, but given the record number of homicides that Atlanta saw last year, are there any new initiatives or specific plans that APD is unveiling this year, specifically addressed at stemming the rise in homicide?
Absolutely. Actually, we are presenting our 90-day plan to the mayor this week. In that plan, we talk about continued relationship and strengthening our relationship. As the mayor stated earlier, we are rejoining a number of task force that we think will bring us additional resources. Again, our local partnerships with our new Fulton County Sheriff's Office and some other state entities that we're rejoining. So I'm certain and confident that these different collaborations and then the restructuring of some of the things internally will bring the resources needed to address the numbers that we've seen.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Next up, we have Diana Bagby. Diana, go ahead.
Diana, we can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Good afternoon.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the questions. My question is about, there is a organization that has formed in Buckhead that is raising money right now to try to perhaps break off from the city of Atlanta. A new Buckhead cityhood movement has started back up, and one of the main items that they are citing is crime rates increasing in Buckhead. And I was wondering what your response to this move is.
Diana, what outlet are you with?
The Atlanta Business Chronicle newspaper.
Okay, thank you. So in response to that, my response is that Buckhead is an important part of the city of Atlanta and always has been and will continue to be such. I am working with leaders from the Buckhead Coalition as well as a number of entities throughout the city to make sure that we're doing all that we can do to respond to crime. I don't believe that the creation of another city will solve that issue. As we know, people can travel across geographic lines. They do it each day, every day. A number of the issues that we've had in the city of Atlanta, as we know, have come from people traveling from out of state. So establishing a city is not going to address that issue, but it is going to be addressed through partnership and productive dialogue on how we can address crime, not just in Buckhead, but throughout the city of Atlanta. And I'm very happy to say that those discussions and our working relationship continues in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Richard Belcher. And as a reminder, please do turn on your camera when you come over.
You hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Happy New Year and congratulations on your new job.
Thank you.
I'm going to follow up on the Buckhead matter. I've listened to a little of the audio from the meeting last night, and one of the organizers, Mr. Linnaeus, says the city is facing a critical shortage of officers. In the context of the Buckhead movement, if you will, and in the larger context of the city, how serious is the shortage of officers, or do you even consider it a shortage?
Richard, we know we've been here before, and what we are facing in Atlanta really is no different than what's being faced across the country, just in terms of the difficulty in attracting officers and attracting people into public safety. It's a difficult time across the country right now. Part of our challenge has been we have the recruitment classes lined up and ready to go. But because a number of government entities are not up and functional across the United States, it's made it more challenging for us to get some of the background information that we need to make sure that our recruits are able to move forward in the class. The reason that our administration pushed forward with a 30% pay increase for our officers was to address this shortage. While we did have officers who left over the summer, I can't imagine there's a department in this country that didn't face that same challenge. But I also know that we have had a number of officers who have returned and have sought to return to APD after going to other agencies. So we know that we've continuously been challenged in this area. It's why we gave the pay increase. But it is something that we're, with the advent of technology and other resources, we are able to fill in many of those gaps. And if I miss anything, I'll let Chief Bryant join in if I missed anything on that.
Can I have one follow-up before we go to the chief? You talked there, I don't want to say at a 30,000 foot level, but down really where the rubber meets the road, do you have enough officers where the men and women in the uniform division can get to calls that are urgent and get there quickly?
Yes.
You don't have any doubts about that?
I don't have any doubts about that. But again, I will defer to Chief Bryant. Ideally, we would have more officers, but I do know that we have enough officers to cover our city. But again, this is about partnership. It's the reason we're talking with Sheriff Labatt about his office partnering. It's the reason that on days that we need additional resources, that we partner with the State Patrol, we partner with other entities throughout the metro area. But on a day-to-day basis, I do believe that we have the number of officers that we need. Although it's not an ideal number, we would like to have more officers. I'm confident that we have enough officers to respond to our day-to-day calls.
Chief, did you want to add anything, or did the mayor address it?
Hey, Richard, absolutely. I think the mayor touched it. I think the greater concern that individuals, the people have as it relates to the resources that we have in the city of Atlanta, we operate a certain number of officers on the street on a daily basis. And then there's a number that we recognize that is a critical number that we manage as well. We have not hit that critical number when of officers responding to 911 calls. However, if we do, again, we're talking about the largest police department in this state. And so if we needed to pull resources and cut back on our administrations and some of our other auxiliary units, we can do so to ensure that the citizens of this city is never in danger.
And Richard, I'll just point out, even over the past week, you've covered City Hall for quite some time. There are adjustments that are made when we do need more officers on the streets. So, for example, off days were canceled, and there are other adjustments that can be made. But again, I want to be clear. Ideally, we would have more officers as a part of APD, but there are some things that are outside of our control in terms of how we get background information to make sure that those who are in our recruitment pipeline are eligible to proceed with that recruitment. We're going to continue to press forward with our recruitment. We're going to continue to do everything that we can do in conjunction with the Police Foundation to make sure that we are increasing the morale of our officers and doing what we can do to retain those officers. But this is not a challenge that is just faced in Atlanta. This is a challenge that's being faced across the country and has been for quite some time as people are seeking other professions outside of law enforcement.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Joe with 11 Alive. Joe, go ahead and turn on your camera.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor Bottoms, for the time. Apologies. I know it's 2021. My work computer does not have a camera here, if you can believe it or not. So apologies for the lack of video. 6+ months have passed since the Use of Force Advisory Council first met, and shortly after that, they handed you a list of recommendations. I know you did sign some orders to quickly enact some of those items. Can you give us an update, though, of what the latest is in actions being taken from that report? And especially, I know it's probably important to the public, there was that item for an online dashboard, so there'd be more transparency in the use of force data and other records.
And I'm going to let our Chief Operating Officer, John King, join in if I missed something on this. But as you know, Joe, this was going to be a series of initiatives that we would implement. We knew that there were some that needed to be in place immediately. We knew that there were others that would come on board as we onboarded PERF. And I want to make sure I have it right. Atlanta Urban Renewal. I hope I got the name right on our other important partner in this work. But there were recommendations that we were also going to have them assess during their time with us. So they are in place doing those assessments. Part of it's going to be some public input, but in terms specifically of the dashboard, I'm going to toss to John Keene and let John speak on that as to where we are with the implementation and public uploading of that dashboard.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So we have begun the process in order to implement that. Our AIM team, which is Atlanta Information Management, that does the creation of those dashboards, has been working closely with APD and other partners to make sure that we have the right technology in place. So I expect that we will have that up imminently, and that we'll have the ability to make those uploads. So that is a core part, and it was one of the administrative orders. It is one of the things that was reviewed and recommended, and that we have chosen to move forward with. And so I do expect that will be up and running here in the very near future.
Perfect. Thank you. There's two other items I was hoping we could touch on real quickly, Mayor, if that's all right. One, the City Council this week has been looking at some public safety specific items. One, creation of Department of Public Safety and Wellness with the aim of, it might come in as an emergency call, but it's more of a mental health issue. It might not need specifically uniformed officers to respond. They've also discussed removing Office of Professional Standards out of its current role and having it run more independent reviews into misconduct, and also focus on improving morale and recruitment within the department, which you've discussed often. And then Councilman Shook introduced a resolution saying the CDC could possibly offer some help, or has said that they could offer help in analyzing Atlanta crime stats and rise in violent crime. Do you have any thought on those City Council initiatives or current studies, and are those things you would like to see action on?
Yeah, and Joe, this is in keeping with the question that Maria has texted Michael. I think that we're still having some issues with her audio. She mentioned that during my last press conference, I said publicly, if there are things that we're not doing or have not implemented that you think will help, by all means, let me know, let us know. So a lot of the feedback that we've gotten has been redundant in terms of things that the administration is currently exploring or already doing, specifically as it relates to Councilmember Brown and Councilmember Shook. I'll start with Councilmember Brown. I don't believe that another department creation is necessary, but I will, with an open mind, look at the feedback that's received once a feasibility study is done. A lot of this work is already being done by other departments, and part of the reason we have the Citizens Review Board is so that when there are challenges with APD, there is an independent board to look at those matters on a case-by-case basis. Starting up a city department is very costly, and also, quite frankly, it's under the purview of the administration as to how we reorg. And so to the extent that any of these areas need to be moved into other areas or other departments, I'm confident that we can do that. But again, I'm gonna, with an open mind, look at that feasibility study and take that feedback in, and also, again, working with our professional partners that we have brought on board to explore this. As it relates to Councilmember Shook, the CDC may very well be helpful. We know that the CDC, at least at the top level, has had some challenges under the Trump administration, but I'm confident with the Biden administration that we'll get the support that we need in this area. And also, the support that we need from the Department of Justice under the new administration, who will also be able to provide us resources and guidance as it relates to crime fighting. So I'm very much looking forward again to this national coordination coming from the White House that has been sorely missed in the time that I've been mayor.
And the very last, very brief item, I promise. I asked you earlier in the pandemic in one of these briefings about Atlanta's next permanent police chief. You said at that time it wasn't the advice you were receiving. It wasn't the good time to do a nationwide search for a new police chief. We've since seen some larger cities hire new police chiefs. Any update on whether there is an active search for a new police chief, or if you're still considering Chief Bryant possibly becoming a permanent police chief?
Yeah, and I believe Washington, D.C. just hired a permanent chief, and they went with an internal candidate for that position, I believe. Again, what I said then, and I'll say now, part of the reason we brought in outside entities with national expertise was to give us feedback. The feedback that I've received from PERF in onboarding, that we should give Chief Bryant an opportunity to show whether or not he is the appropriate candidate. And PERF is going to help us with that evaluation. I am confident that Chief Bryant is the right leader for Atlanta at this time. And again, I want to remind everyone, Chief Bryant was off enjoying retirement when I called and asked him if he would come back and serve as our interim corrections chief. And then he was willing to serve, and I asked him to serve as our interim police chief. So this is not a position that he sought. It's not a position that he lobbied for. I asked him to come back. I knew his experience based on our working relationship when he was my zone commander. So I will await the feedback from Perf. We should be getting that feedback soon. This is one of their early items to give us more information on. And at the time that we get that feedback one way or the other, I will be sure to let you all know.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor.
And our final question comes from Maynard Eaton. Maynard, go ahead.
Hello, Mayor. How are you?
Good, Maynard. How are you?
Good, man. Listen, as this spike in crime and the resulting stories about our crime rate, are you concerned that may hurt or cripple your reelection for mayor bid?
I mean, I don't take anything for granted, Maynard. No mayor likes negative stories, and you certainly don't like stories when you know that people are dying in your city. I would rather have the bad story than have people dying on our streets. But it's where we are as a city. It's something that I continue to focus on and take very seriously, not for purposes of reelection, but because this is my city. And this is the city that I'm raising my family in. And it's the city that I send my 18-year-old out of the door with all the cares and concerns that any parent has. And you all have heard me say this before. The worst has happened to my family because my 18-year-old nephew was murdered. Wrong place, wrong time, in the middle of a gang war that he didn't even know was happening. So I know what this feels like, and I know how personal it is for every family that's impacted. So reelection will take care of itself, but the care and concern I have about crime in this city extends far beyond any race that I'll be a part of.
Finally, Mayor, are you anticipating preparing for a tough challenge to your reelection?
I'm anticipating that it's a race, and it's going to be a real race. So I'll be geared up. Whether I was geared up for my reelection when I ran for city council. I don't take anything for granted. We've seen mayors across the country who didn't get reelected. So I like to think I'm pretty special, but that probably just is part of my thinking of myself. I do not assume that the rest of Atlanta thinks that, and I know that I'm going to have to prove myself to everybody who will show up to vote, just like I did just a few years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that will be it.
All right. Well, thank you all, and hope to see you soon again. Happy New Year, and here's to praying and believing that 2021 is going to be a better year for us all. Thank you.